Well, Grant, thank you very much for your presentation. I think we all learned a little bit more about your perspective from freight hauling from the logging industry. To our audience, keep posting questions. We'll have some time, hopefully, at the end to get some more. But for right now, I'm going to turn it over to Caitlyn Hughes and give her control of the screen and give her presentation. Caitlyn joins us from the U.S. Department of Transportation, where she directs freight policy, programming, and regulatory matters of the Office of Freight Management and Operations, Office of Operations for Federal Highway Administration. Caitlyn?
Good morning, everybody. I want to thank Grant for that presentation, very interesting. And I'm curious to learn more about the proposal and some of the metrics used, for example, to calculate the cost comparison between interstate usage and off usage in terms of the impacts on the roadway. I'm going to apologize first because I don't have a cleared PowerPoint presentation, so you'll just have to look at my face or blank screen. I'm going to walk through my points, and then there is one slide I want to share, so don't tell anybody. But I think it's best if I share it with you. I think it'll help demonstrate one of the tools we have available to you, and then I'll get the slide deck cleared and get it out to you guys later. The things I'd like to cover today, I was trying to think of the scope of activities that we have going on at Federal Highway and how that would relate to agriculture and the Southeast. So I've got some updates on some of our key programs with a little bit of a Southeastern spin to it. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat pod. First, I want to say I'm the director of the Office of Freight Management and Operations. We're an interesting office in that we have a lot of freight program activities, but we also have our hand in some funding. So I'll touch a little bit on some of the funding programs. I'm going to briefly go over an update on state freight plans and a toolkit option we have for you. Talk a little bit about critical rural freight corridor designation. As I mentioned, I'll discuss some funding programs, both discretionary and formula. Talk a little bit about FAF, updates to the freight analysis framework. Mention the freight mobility tool, and that's one of the slides I want to share with you. It's a tool that you can use. I'll get into that. Briefly, truck parking information, briefly, emergency route working group update, research on some bridge strikes that we're undertaking, and a little bit on vehicle size and weight. Hopefully I can get that all in before 10:30. So let me jump in here and let you know that the state freight plans, all the states produced state freight plans as part of the FAST Act requirement in order to be able to access funding, the National Highway Freight Program funding that was available from 2017 on. And those plans were great. And there were a number of really great examples of how to tackle some of the provisions in there. And it was everyone's first time. So we know that you're undertaking your updates now. Because there's a 5-year update cycle, there are a number of you that are going to have your plans due, your updated plan due in 2022. So next year, we'll be looking forward to seeing the updated plans from Alabama, Mississippi, North Carolina, Kentucky, and Missouri. Those are the ones in the southeastern region that we are aware of that have a 22 deadline. We'd like to help you. We have developed a toolkit that defines the fundamental elements of the state freight plan updates and provides some instruction for self-analysis as to how to improve those areas. It's not specific feedback to your prior plan, but it's general feedback that'll help you walk through a look at your plan and how much farther you could go with that. This is a voluntary activity, and we're looking for volunteer states who want to help us vet the pilot. We already have interest from Georgia, and we're excited to work with Tom on that. But we're looking for between 5 and 9 states nationwide whose plans need to be updated in 2022, who can help us pilot the strategies that we've developed in that toolkit. It's going to include some case studies that describe effective state freight plan practices based on what we saw from the first round. And then after we complete the pilot of 5 to 9 states, we'll put out a second edition of the toolkit that'll be available for states whose plan updates are due in late 2022 or 2023. If you have any more questions about that, Tiffany Julian in our office can help you sign up to be a volunteer state, or give you more details about what the toolkit offers. One of the things I just want to mention is that if you're a state that has maybe you're less urban, that would be a great candidate for an additional pilot state in the Southeast. Next, I want to talk about the critical rural freight corridors. That's part of the National Highway Freight Network, which is a subset of the National Highway Freight Program, and it can help provide eligibility if you're looking to spend your NHFP monies on a project that's not currently in the primary highway freight network or in the primary highway freight system or the National Highway Freight Network. Some states have made designations, some have not fully utilized their mileage. You can designate up to 150 miles of highway or 20% of your primary highway freight system, whichever's greater, as critical rural freight corridors. And right now there's 4,412 centerline miles of designated CRFC. If you're interested in designating it because you want to spend some of that NHFP money on a roadway that's not currently part of your primary highway freight system, please get in contact with our office or start really with your Division Office of Federal Highway in your state. Next, I'd like to talk about the funding, that funding I mentioned earlier, National Highway Freight Program funding. The FAST Act provided about $1.2 billion annually in transportation funding that goes directly to the states. Between 2016 and 2020, nearly $17 billion of National Highway Freight Program and other funding sources were identified in state freight plans. So that includes the match funding that you guys have put forward for projects. About 24% of these projects are located on high volume domestic agriculture highways. That's a statistic that comes from work done by the USDA in December on the importance of highways to U.S. agriculture. Probably Brian Endorf will be covering that a little bit later today. Other types of funding include grant programs. Several of you have taken advantage of what's now known as BUILD, used to be TIGER, used to be ERA. We just wanted to provide an update on BUILD and also infra. USDOT anticipates publishing the final NOFO, Notice of Funding Opportunity, for the 2021 round of BUILD in the near future. So stay tuned. For 2021, Congress had appropriated $1 billion in funding and included the longstanding requirement to award 50% of the funds to projects in rural areas. And for purposes of BUILD, rural areas are defined as less than 200,000 in population. Since the program's inception, 44% of BUILD projects have been awarded to rural areas. I think most of you know how to find out where the NOFOs are and take advantage of that. The other program of interest in that area that's also managed, at least the federal highway portion is managed out of our office, the freight office, is the infra program. Infra, Nationally Significant Freight and Highway Projects Program. That program also will be publishing a NOFO in the very near future, probably by the end of this month. And for 2021, Congress appropriated $1 billion in infra funding, of which a quarter is reserved for rural areas, and same definition of rural, less than 200,000 in population. Since the program's inception, 56% of infra projects have been awarded in rural areas. Next, I just want to give you a brief update on FAF. Many of you used the freight analysis framework. We will be publishing an update to FAF. The FAF 5 releases will occur starting this year. For now, I've just got some FAF 4 numbers for you. We did a quick run on the ITTS member states and found that trucks carry more than 50% of the freight for ITTS member states. This modal share looks like it's going to go up to 56% in 2045. compared to about 54% in 2012. And the US as a whole should stay steady around 64%. These numbers are from FHWA, which is a 2012 based flow information. The forecast details, which include top commodity and international trade, are debatable. You know, there's potential long-term structural changes that could come from such factors as changes in population, technology, other policies and business operations. For example, a change in truck size and weight, that could affect it. With the upcoming FHWA data, we're going to capture the changes that we've seen from 2012 to 2017. And the planned FHWA forecast will consider the effects of recent events on future FHWA freight flow scenarios. And probably by recent events could include pandemic. You know, that's 2020, so it'll probably be looked at in terms of a projection. Again, with FHWA, we looked at the total flows and found that about 40% of the U.S. freight flow starts or ends within ITTS member states. 60% of these freight flows occur just between ITTS members. I saw a comment earlier about a variation, what types of forest products there are. I think that was Tom McQueen might have posted that. Other top commodities by weight for ITTS member states include coal and petroleum products, crude petroleum, fuel oil, and gravel. Comes from FHWA. And the final FHWA comment I'd have is that on international exports and imports, by 2045, we see freight flow related to international export as being expected to be higher than the international import flow. So right now, based on the 2012 data, the total international import for ITTS member states was a little bit higher than 400,000 kilotons, and the exports were a little bit under 400,000 kilotons. By 2045, that projection is reaching about 1 million kilotons for export. And as I said, that it flips where we have now a lower proportion of import for the ITTS member states, something that appears to be around, I would say, a little over 700,000 in kilotons. Next, I'm going to turn to our very, very cool freight mobility trends dashboard and toolkit. Hopefully, between TRB and a couple of webinars we've held this fall, you should have seen a demonstration from Jeff Purdy of our office on this tool. It uses the NPM RDS data and can provide you such things as total delay on various networks, delay per mile, travel time index, planning time index, buffer index, travel reliability index, and congestion cost. And we're looking to build that out also this year with some information on emissions related to delay. It is based on truck hours of delay per mile. And as I said, the Freight Mobility Trends uses data from the National Performance Management Research Dataset. The delay per mile is calculated for each interstate segment, and it's pretty specific. It's got delay calculated as the difference between actual travel time and reference travel time. The reference travel time is based on the 85th percentile speed during off-peak and overnight. Delay for each 15-minute time period is multiplied by 15-minute truck volumes, and the delay for each 15-minute time period is aggregated to get the annual truck hours of delay. Those hours of delay are then divided by the segment length to get delay per mile. We have information for 2017, 18, and 19, and then we're updating this dashboard with information quarterly, so you can get a really good understanding of how things change seasonally and so forth. I do want to caution you, it's not a surrogate for your performance measures that you submit because the segments are split a little differently, but it is very useful as a planning tool, project prioritization tool, and I heavily recommend that you take a look at it when you do your updates to state freight. Bring dates information definitely will help you look at corridors, interstate sections ordered by truck hours of delay per mile, contiguous bottleneck sections along corridors, delay per mile or segment can be used to rank bottlenecks and congestion costs calculated for the full corridor. I do want to share, there are slides like comparison of delay per mile, so try to get these out to you. We do have a list there of major freight highway bottlenecks and congested corridors. Very interesting. That's a nationwide list already projected, already produced for you to look at. You can do your own projections using this tool. And I am going to attempt to share this screen. Bear with me. Shouldn't take too long because I was looking for the button earlier. Here we go. Can you see it? Is this working? Do you see a PowerPoint presentation?
No,
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Well, let me not. Oh, it's got a. Here we go. It asks me if I want to share it. How's that? It doesn't work in 3 seconds. I'm gonna terminate this attempt. All right, not working. I'm going to go back to reading. So we ran the numbers and looked at the ITTS state's major freight highway bottlenecks in 2019. And we also had, for example, their rank nationwide. So the top one, I don't know if anyone's going to guess this, we show I-35 in Austin, Texas, which also ranks number 4 on the national list, followed by I-610 in Houston. Most of these are Texas. The first 4 are Texas. We get to Atlanta by the 5th one on this list, and that's I-75, I-85 interchange, followed by 3 in Louisiana, more Atlanta, Maryland, Virginia. We get Arkansas in there, Virginia hits, Kentucky, Ohio. I think you're going to want to look at this. And the reason is you can see these, you can see where they fall compared to the nationwide list of top 100. Texas Triangle, as I mentioned, very congested in Austin, Houston, and Dallas. And then through I-10 actually is a key corridor with bottlenecks along the Gulf Coast. Goes through Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas to California. And then the Atlanta region's bottlenecks include I-75, 85, and 285. I-85 is an important corridor through the Carolinas, and the recently completed I-85, I-385 interchange in Greenville, South Carolina addressed a major bottleneck in this corridor. That's one of the things we were able to tell through looking at this data historically. You know, it was there, and then it wasn't there, and we did some validating and discovered it was because of a road project that was finally completed. The I-95 corridor, which was mentioned by Grant in his presentation, that's a critical link. Obviously, we all know that in the East Coast, but there are bottlenecks in the DC area and in Florida, other critical links are evident at river crossings such as I-64 crossing the Mississippi River in St. Louis, and the I-71, I-75 crossing the Ohio River into Cincinnati. There was a crash earlier there on the Brent Spence Bridge, resulted in a temporary closure to trucks during bridge repair. It caused major transportation disruptions in the area. Could be that we'll see that in some of the data going forward. I would actually recommend that folks who are looking at Grant's presentation, thinking about their truck routes that they would use if they were looking at the interstate, take a look at what how they present in this freight mobility tool. Maybe you'll learn some interesting things about the average delays. See whether that really does get you the time savings that you project by switching to interstates. See where some of the reliability issues are, and have been proven out through data.
Caitlyn,
Anyway,
can
yeah.
you turn your video on?
Oh, sure. Sorry. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. I don't look that different from my picture, hopefully. That was only a year ago. I'm just going to wrap up here with a few slides that I will read to you. We did study truck parking as part of the Jason's Law provisions in MAP 21 and put out results from 2 surveys. The report from the second survey is not out yet. So Tom McQueen, you don't need to ask about that, but we did put the data up on our website and held a coalition on truck parking meeting in December. So there's information from that coalition, including a summary in PowerPoint form of all the highlights of what we learned from the second truck parking survey. Thank you to all the states who helped us in completing that analysis. We learned, unsurprisingly, truck parking shortages continue to be a major problem in every state and region. Major freight corridors, large metro areas have the most acute shortages. And there are some solutions being put into place. Florida, statewide, Texas in the I-10 corridor, and Virginia in the I-95 corridor, or through the I-95 corridor coalition, now known as the Eastern Transportation Coalition, have all implemented truck parking information and management systems to inform drivers. Good direction there. But there's still challenges in funding truck parking expansion, which is really what's needed. So local government involvement is really encouraged. And we're helping both MPOs and states convene truck parking dialogues with the private sector to help get at what are the major issues and what are some of the solutions that can be done in those areas. We hope that you're taking a hard look as states at truck parking. It's not a requirement of the state freight plans, but could be a good direction if you want to start adding that in, because this is one of the things that tends to have an impact on driver interest in driver satisfaction and ultimately driver retention. So to help with truck driver shortages, it would be good to tackle the truck parking issue. Truck hours of service continues to be critical part of drivers' calculus. But when you look at the delay that I talked about earlier, that can end up having drivers be in places where they hadn't expected and didn't anticipate needing to park. So going to have to continue to work on that as a nation going forward. I do have some specifics on where some of the additional truck parking needs are. Can't show that slide, but that actually is in the PowerPoint that's been loaded to the truck parking information on our website. Finally, we've got a few resiliency initiatives. Some of you may be familiar with the Emergency Route Working Group that convened a few years back. Their report went to the secretary, who was then Secretary Chow, and we then undertook a number of the initiatives recommended. We are currently working on assessment of auto issue permit systems in the U.S. There was a recommendation for multi-state emergency route scenario study to assess the cost of delay. So we're working on that. Feasibility study of the nationwide alert system and emergency routing web tool, got that under development, and resources on federal regulations related to emergency response. So a lot of good things moving forward to help you tackle that issue. And then another thing we started last year was bridge strikes. We know bridge strikes are a problem nationwide. It's one of those cross-cutting issues, but didn't appear anyone in particular was focusing on how to prevent them so much as catalog and respond to them. So right now we got 2 initiatives underway, one with the National Cooperative Highway Research Program, NCHRP, working on some bridge strike data and framework, and also working with the World Road Association to see if we can collect information worldwide. We're looking for countermeasures, systems for preventing bridge and tunnel strikes, not just to roadway bridges, but also railway bridges. That has an impact on rail efficiency as well. better oversized and overweight practices and procedures, and driver training and routing systems. So if you have anything to offer as a best practice, please get in touch with us. That would be Jeff Purdy, who also does our truck parking work, along with Tiffany Julian. And I want to close by talking about vehicle size and weight. Some agricultural and rural topics in truck size and weight. Well, you already heard from Grant. Weight is a big one, and you also heard from him that Congress is the entity that can deal with truck weights. We have seen, of course, over many years now, efforts to change truck weights, generally in a piecemeal fashion, generally in appropriations acts or some reauthorization acts. Sometimes it's by commodity or by a specific route. And generally speaking, that is not a very helpful approach for efficiency. It results in a lot of confusion at the state to state borders, where you have to change over your loads and your flagging and so forth. So we have done in the past a truck size and weight study to see what kinds of heavier trucks or longer combination vehicles could help with efficiency. There were some data gaps there, so we are doing a truck size and weight implementation plan to better focus on filling in those gaps. And we did a little work on twin 33s, 33-foot long trailers, and hopefully that material will be coming out soon. I see that I'm out of time, so I'll just mention we do have with AASHTO a permit data harmonization project underway. We also are working on how to improve the Stafford Act requirements for special permits that can be issued during an emergency. We discovered some issues with that during the COVID response. And other things, make sure you know the National Freight Strategic Plan was released in September. Take a look at that. We'll have a networks and data brochure coming out this year, and of course, an update to our highway freight conditions and performance report. So with that, I'm sorry to say I used up all the time, but if there are any questions, I'll try to talk fast.
Thank you, Caitlyn. That was a very informative presentation. You packed a lot in there. I see a couple of people on the chat are eager to see your presentation. I understand you were unable to share that today, but when it is approved, you can make that available. I'm going to just hit on a couple of questions that we saw in here, and then maybe you can go back through the chat box and try to answer some of them in writing. So Scott Thompson was asking, what's the position of using delay per miles versus total delay? Puts a higher emphasis on potentially very short TMC segments, delay mile emphasis, short segment over longer segments that accumulate more delay in total.
I'm looking for that.
It's, let's see, if you're in the chat box, it was posted at 9:19, and then Virginia Porter also said, good question, we opted to change our reference metric as delay over 2 hours and not 4 hours, more relevant for our travel characteristics. So there's two people that were looking at the
okay, well, that information that I presented and the slides that I couldn't show you other than the ITTS one are also available on our website. I'll try to get the link back out to you. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to in time for the end of this presentation, but we'll get the information back out to all of you. Okay.
I had also requested that you post the information for the volunteer, if you want to be a volunteer state, or the toolkit that you mentioned early on. Maybe if you can put that website in there, that might be helpful.
It's an email address.
Okay. I know that Missouri, we're doing our freight and rail plan update right now. Let's see if I can find a couple others. Here's one from Trung. Does the freight plan toolkit indicate a preference on usage of the FAF4 or the FAF5 data?
Well, I mean, the FAF5 data is not all going to be out this spring. Some of it won't be released till later in toward the end of the year. So I think, people who are undertaking their updates now, they're going to be kind of in the middle of what's available. So it depends on what particular type of FAF data you want. But Our contact for FAF data is Bharat Pandey, and I'll put that in the chat room as well. If you have specific questions about what's going to be available, timeframes are estimated really because some of this depended on materials that got a little delayed, I think, with the pandemic response.
Okay. And I know that we're getting into our small group discussion time, but I just wanted to ask on the infra and build. You mentioned that infra will probably be posted this month. Do you foresee any significant changes from the one that was posted earlier this year and then pulled and then can be reposted?
There weren't significant changes in the statute because it's, you know, it's an authorized program. Build is the one that usually has the more specific stuff that Congress puts in the annual appropriations. But every administration takes an opportunity to look at the NOFO and put in their own spin. So it's possible that you might see some new priorities emphasized in there. I just don't have that information at this time. So when you get the NOFO, don't assume it's identical to prior ones. Always take a look and participate in the webinars that'll talk about any changes in the NOFO.
Absolutely. Well, Caitlyn, again, thank you so much for your time and for your presentation. I know that everyone is eager to see your slide deck when it's available.
Okay.
I'll turn this back over to Frank and let us get on with our small group discussions. Thank you both, Caitlyn and Grant.